Welcome to my presentation for the virtual Middle Ages workshop. I'm really excited to be part of this. My name is Silke Schwandt, and I teach digital history and medieval history at the University of Bielefeld. Today, I'm going to be talking about interactive knowledge graphs for historical research and the question of appropriating knowledge about the Middle Ages in VR. In order to do this, I'm going to take you on a small journey to our virtual reality application that we designed within a project that was funded by the Federal Ministry for Education and Research, the BMBF, and the project is called the e-TARDIS, and it's about the exploration of temporal and spatial data in immersive scenarios. And entry hall, the office of the e-TARDIS, you can see here behind me as a screenshot from the virtual reality. Before I take you into that application, I want to just dwindle a little on the question of history practices of history telling, historiography, and the question of how our historical narratives are built. Because in our project for the virtual reality, we did not aim to sort of redesign a historical setting to be as immersive as possible. So you cannot walk through, I don't know, the cathedral or a monastery or something like that, but you will be able to engage with knowledge graphs that represent what we know about the past. And we decided to go this way because historical narratives are based on data that represent a certain perspective. They are oriented in knowledge orders and models. They represent a model or modeling practices. They reveal the limits of one's own perspective, and they develop productive potential through interactivity and manipulability. And that's what sort of the virtual reality surrounding offers us to interact with these knowledge graphs that are basically based on different sets of data, of information that we already have. And when we were designing this project, we decided to start with a data set that was already done with a historical perspective, which is what you can see here. In a first version, it was published in around about 1950s by the German historiographer and geographer Arno Peters, with a big team of people and researchers who collected lots of historical knowledge all around the globe. And the idea was to have this synchronoptic atlas, a world history, where you see lots of things that happen at the same time. So Arno Peters' idea was to not only sort of sort history or historical narratives and information regionally, but design a set where you can see the synchronicity. So here on the page in the middle, you see all these lines. They give you an overview of contemporaries, so people who lived at the same time. And the rest of the data is organized according to different categories of knowledge. So the one is about politics and revolutions, another one is on economics, and lots of historical events are sort of put into this overview. And you can see in the timeline at the bottom that this double page basically represents the 19th century. And of course, again, this is very much depending on the perspective of the people who collected the knowledge. And as you can see here, this is a picture of basically the little cards that they had where they collected their knowledge, and you see this is in German, unfortunately, so not everybody will be able to read this, but it's supposed to give you an impression of how they organize their knowledge. So you've got these little cards, and they are organized by centuries, and they sort of give you the name of the author. You can see that on the top there, Visa, and the card was written on the 10th of May in 1951. And then you get the information about the event that is in capitals, so in bold letters at the top. This is a card that represents the 14th century because we are actually interested in the Middle Ages. And then in the 1990s, this whole material has been digitized. And you can now sort of have a digitized version of that big atlas where you have not only the double page, but you've got this sort of overview in the same way. So you still have the time spans or the lifespan of the contemporaries in the middle, And then you've got these sets of events at the top, at the bottom. And of course, in the digital, this is all interactive. So you can click on the events and they get all the information that is necessary. But it is still kind of a linear understanding of history, right? And what they did in the digital version is they added a different kind of perspective to this material, which looks more like this. So now you've got a more of a spatial interpretation of the way that these bits of information are related to each other. So again, I chose the 1331 card, so the entry that I also showed you on the little information card before, to put that in the middle, and then you have these different layers of time that represents the temporal difference between the bits of information. You can see the color code again. That sort of gives you an idea about the ontology of the events. So the categories, again, of economics, political developments, and the contemporaries, so the important historical people. And the distance between the different bubbles or nodes that you can see here shows their difference in time. So the closer to the middle, the closer or the shorter the temporal distance. And the size of those nodes is what they call the relevance of the historical information. And this is where the problem begins, you know? And of course, the question of what is the important information, what is the relevant event, is always something that is difficult to decide, but we do that all the time. So when I looked at this, my idea was to design an application where people are able to be very aware of that perspective and that of the construction of historical narratives, which is why I decided to go with the virtual realities environment, because there you can design very interactive scenarios or applications. And that's what we did, basically. So I'm going to take you into a tour, into that virtual reality application in just a few seconds. We started with a prototype where we visualized this data as a knowledge graph in virtual reality. But as you can imagine, it's a kind of a smallish graph. And of course, because this is such a specific design, it is, again, a very specific perspective. So we decided to go with a bigger corpus of data. And we went with the knowledge that we can take from Wikipedia or DBpedia, and also Wikimedia and Wikidata, because there, the structure that is used to represent knowledge in Wikipedia, as everybody of course knows, is in itself already a knowledge graph. So you've got all these hyperlinks between the articles, different information is connected. So we could take that because it is in itself something that is very similar to a knowledge graph. And also the role of Wikipedia in present day society is something like what the, I don't know, the Brockhaus or the Britannica Encyclopedia was for generations before. So it's basically something that you could interpret as the knowledge that we all share about certain events and of course also history. So that's why we took that. We've got lots of information. We've got audio, video, we've got images, scanned books, historically significant photographs, figures, and maps. That is all in Wikipedia. And then we decided to use an ontology, so a system of organizing that kind of information that is as general as possible, to not give too much of our own perspective into the data set, which of course it is never possible to really have it as an objective setting. But if you look at the categories that are put on this slide, we tried to do it as general as possible. So we've got agents, places, and events. We've got topical concepts, something like the French Revolution or historicity. We've got material objects, so books, architectural things, cultural artifacts, very closely related, but cultural artifacts can also be the publication of the relativity theory. And then it's not only a book, but rather a cultural artifact. And of course, miscellaneous, which you kind of always need when you design data sets or data models. And then we had to make some decisions about the temporal and spatial relation of our information. So we decided to go with descriptive categories or properties of the categories, such as time period, for example. But I'm sure we can talk about this in more depth and more length when we get together in Bochum. So now I'm going to take 2 minutes to take you through our virtual reality application, because I think it's important to actually see what's happening, which is why we have this screencast video, and I'm going to play this, and then hopefully this works. And then I will show you the video. So here you can now see the video. I'm just going to start it. And again, you can see the room where you enter the eTARDIS, and you have different options to also look at what the controllers can do and have the different options and help options to look at. And if you turn to your right, you now can enter the different pre-organized data sets that we have. This is the 100 Years' War data set, which I picked for our presentation today, of course, because it's about medieval data that I wanted to show you. Here we went for a representation of the world map to actually see, also to give you the opportunity to filter the information that you want to see by region. So here you can sort of use the radius, and then we would only include the data that is present within that radius in your in the data set that you want to see. And now you can pick the point in which so the different data nodes that you want to see. Here we went for the example to look for everything related to battles, and we have 105 data points. And here to your right, you can see the knowledge graph, right? So you've got these different nodes that are related to each other. I'm just gonna make a quick break here. So the nodes that you can see at the wall and the relationship that they have to each other is always either temporally, so the distance relates to the distance in time, or spatially. And we will see how that works in just a minute. And one of these nodes that we saw at the wall will now be the place where you will enter into the network. So the whole thing about the eTARDIS is to be able to enter the knowledge graph, to look around, to see that sometimes the most important information is behind your back and you have to turn around. So we will show you now how to navigate that further. And this is basically the surrounding that you have. So you're standing on the battle, on the one historical event, and you can see now in your surroundings the different knowledge nodes that you can now select and see the information about the distance of two nodes to each other. And you can always decide that the distance from the middle, so from the node that you're standing on to the other nodes, is either temporal, spatial, or semantic. And then, of course, you also have the relation between two possible nodes. And here you can see that you can always change the way that these nodes are related to each other from spatial to temporal, as we did in this case. And then you see how the whole network changes around you. So this is really experiencing perspective, right? So you have these different possible combinations, and each step that you take in our fragmentarium or in that in this application is about highlighting that specific situatedness of any knowledge that we are interested in. But of course, you can also look at the different information that we have in store for the nodes. So here we take a closer look at Edward III of England. You can also search within that information, and you can annotate the knowledge nodes to actually also sort of enter your own information. You can always take screenshots. You can also sort of do a screencast. Here you can now enter the filter menu again. So if you are really interested in Edward III of England, you might want to filter only for other agents or persons that are related to the node that you're standing on. So now you get sort of a different set of information. So there are two things that I want to highlight. Sort of, we are outside the virtual reality now again, and I know that it is difficult to kind of follow the whole idea behind the application by just taking these sort of 3 minutes within the app. But I took the time to sort of make 2 screenshots because I wanted to highlight one of the features of the application is not only to give you that feeling of being inside a constructed knowledge graph that sort of helps you to appropriate knowledge, but also sort of understand your own perspective within that setting in a very interactive and immersive application. But I think what is really interesting is that you can not only compare 2 nodes to each other, but sort of to make smaller sets of networks, if you will, and then see basically how they are related to each other geographically or time-wise. And of course, as you can see here, some information is missing. So here we have sort of the information in that second box about time is unfortunately invalid because we don't sort of have all the information always ready. But here you see that Charles I and Philip the Good have 50 years of overlap, but they both kind of lived in France. So you get different possibilities to compare, which is basically what historians often do, is to sort of compare information about people, places, historical settings, etc. This is just another visualization where I also included Charlemagne, and you can see that you have the possibilities to build these subsets of networks. Also, of course, save your journey's worth of sort of which networks and sets of information you created. And I think that you now have an impression of what we try to do. So it's not about communicating what history was like or sort of the historical version of a modern place or a person that we can now visit or talk to, but rather use the virtual reality with its interactivity and the immersiveness to design an app where this process of connecting dots, using information, annotating information to build historical knowledge about the Middle Ages in this case, but of course the dataset is much bigger. And in the future, it will also be possible for everyone to add their own data sets to relate that to the data that we have in the database in the background. And I'm really looking forward to sort of discuss with everyone the relation of the different virtual Middle Ages, plural, or the virtuality or the different qualities of virtuality that we deal with in our research. Thank you very much, and I see you soon.